Our beloved ranger constantly talks about how Boo is a miniature giant space hamster. Although the claim sounds far-fetched to most, and we were never told how they officially met, there actually are multiple space hamster races that exist in D&D. They first appeared in the Monstrous Compendium Spelljammer Appendix number 1 for D&D 2nd edition in 1990. The space hamsters are created by gnomes on the planet Krynn that resides in the crystal sphere known as Krynn Space. They're not naturally occurring creatures. The universe known as the Phlogiston has a direct path to realm space, which is of course where Toril is, the planet where we primarily play D&D on. Although exceptionally rare, it's not entirely impossible for any breed of space hamster to find its way to our world and thus into Minsc's hands. In regards to miniature giant space hamsters, although they resemble normal hamsters, they are quite intelligent and do have the ability to talk in whispers. And despite Boo himself being a fierce warrior, he and his miniature kin are quite gentle with children. The gnomes of Krynn brought about these hamsters through experimenting with their breeding process by using magical materials and a variety of monsters, so in a way, there isn't really a set number of breeds. Wherever there is a world colonized by the Krynn, you're sure to find space hamsters. They were originally created by a gnome research committee in an attempt to create a large and passive creature for the purpose of powering a very specific piece of technology. They were made to power their spaceships. That's right, hamster-powered spaceships. Contextually, gnomes and dwarves in space for the D&D Spelljammer setting, they prefer technologically powered Spelljammers instead of the normal magical Spelljammers. Although it's technically really inefficient to not use magic for a Spelljammer, they just love tinkering and building, so it works out for them. Gnomish Spelljammers are called sidewheelers. As you would expect, the giant space hamsters run on giant wheels connected by giant rubber bands. The torque generated from this is what's used for power on their vessels. Your average space hamsters are actually omnivores that are kept on huge ranches run by gnomish colonists. Similar to their counterparts on Earth, they have man-made hutches, and some even enjoy colorful tubes branching above the ground as well. Although easily hunted, if living in the wild, they actually reproduce very quickly. Some gnomes even keep them as livestock, since their meat ended up being quite tasty. They actually call it spam with an H. And with that out of the way, let's look at the original breeds that were first introduced to us in the compendium. Since the word giant space hamster is in practically every single name, I'm going to be dropping it here and there for simplicity's sake. Alright, to start off, we have, of course, miniature space hamsters, who, in addition to the previous information that I mentioned, are often kept as pets. We also have the generic wild hamsters, who gain attack bonuses when confronted by non-hamsters. Subterranean, who can dig through most natural materials. Saber-toothed, who can pack a nasty overbite. Invisible hamsters, who can turn invisible once per day for a few rounds. Sylvan or jungle hamsters that can climb any non-slick surface. Armor-plated hamsters that have a thick rhino-like hide and are known to be very aggressive. We also have a yellow musk giant space hamster. These guys emit a horrible odor which poisons people, usually making them nauseous, blind, and weakened. One particularly interesting one that we also have is a ethereal hamster, which is actually just a translucent hamster with a visible skeleton that you can see. People usually become frightened when they first see these guys. Now, and I quote, "A regrettable, if understandable line of inquiry, this led to carnivorous flying hamsters with bat-like wings. Between their claws and fangs, these guys can deal a fair bit of damage." Another weird one is there is also a two-headed Lernaean bombardier giant space hamster. obviously 2 heads, but what it can do is it can regenerate a small amount of HP, and it can also belch so loudly that anyone in a 30 feet radius must roll a saving throw versus a breath weapon, or be stunned for a number of rounds. And yes, you heard that correctly. This hamster, his belch is so strong it counts as a breath weapon. I absolutely love these little guys. They have so many interesting things they can do. But as far as breath weapons go, here's one with a more traditional breath weapon. But first, a quote from the Krynn Research Committee.
"We completely fail to see why everyone is so upset, especially since biology is such an inexact science, and for every step we take forward, there must be 2 steps backwards. But anyways, we said we were sorry, and we'd like our funding back, so we can pay our bail and go home."
I love these research guys. It always feels like they ask each other if they could, not if they should. Now, this big boy, he is actually called a fire-breathing phase doppelganger. He can breathe a 30-foot long cone of fire that is 10 feet wide at the far end. In addition to taking only half damage from other fire attacks, it can also phase in and out of the prime material plane, just like phase spiders. If its initiative roll has a wide enough margin ahead of yours when you're fighting one of these things, it can get away with attacking, then phasing both in the same turn. But it can also be attacked within the ethereal plane as well, if you know how. And last on its list of skills, it can transform into any bear-sized mammal within 1 round. That's fairly quick in real time. But what makes it truly terrifying is its high intelligence for a mammal of its kind, and its insanely high morale score. As context, during D&D 2nd edition, most monsters would have a morale score somewhere between 2 and 12, 2 being non-combatant and 12 being someone who always fights despite morale, something like an undead or a construct. This particular space hamster has a morale score of 14. If you thought Boo was a fierce warrior, imagine what this guy can do. We're almost to the end, just a few more to go. There is also a simple great horned hamster. This guy can easily do a great deal of damage if given room to charge. You can also think Rhino again, or some other horned monster. We also have an abominable hamster, which is just a white hamster that's adapted to the frozen climates. It's impervious to natural cold and only takes half damage from magical cold. At first glance, this guy might look like a Yeti or something to you. All right, now you guys are gonna love this. I think this one's actually my favorite of the whole list. This thing is 25 feet high at its shoulders, and it weighs 75 tons. This thing is massive and could only be described as belonging to a Jurassic Park movie. But here's the catch. Remember that morale explanation I just mentioned? This creature has 0 means of attacking with a whopping morale score of 3. As big as this thing is, it's so easily frightened that if scared, it will run off anywhere between 1 to 4 miles just to flee whatever scared it. And anything it stomps on in the process just happens to take 10d10 damage. Needless to say, the gnome colony responsible for this big scaredy cat is now defunct, and when asked why they created this thing, they simply said,
"Because it was there."
And now for our finale in the lineup of the original Giant Space Hamsters.
The Giant Space Hamster of Ill Omen.
There is only one of its kind, and to this day he is known only as Woolly Rupert. He's rumored to be even larger than a Tyrannohamsterus rex, and is highly intelligent, as well as possessing the capabilities to cast spells as well as jam spells. Tales among the Krynn Gnomes say that he doesn't like gnomes of any sort, and would just as soon squash them with his titanic paws. Although they may try to laugh it off, gnomes everywhere live in fear of the wrath of Woolly Rupert. Now I bet you're finally wondering, how does this connect to Baldur's Gate 3? Well, I thought it'd be fun to do a wide speculation reach right now. Connecting back to Minsc and the possibility of his return, not to mention the idea that in the new game we're going to be seeing Githyanki elithids, what other creatures from space are we going to see, what other non-terrestrial monsters are we going to perhaps get a hold of. And with that in mind, as a segue from Minsc, I thought it would be fun to speculate, hey, what if we get to see a bunch of giant, space hamsters in this game? Like, these guys are so varied and so fun. I feel like they're gonna make, just become a fun part of the game. It'd be something really nice to see. And that is all I have for you today on Giant Space Hamsters. Now you know where Boo and his other kin come from, all the way up in the sky beyond the stars. If you happen to have a miniature hamster of your own, make sure you give them a little extra love today. I'm sure our friend Minsc would appreciate that. Until next time, you can reach me on Twitter at McAllik_. I hope you enjoyed everything. Stay safe out there.